Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nerf Show, the one-stop shop for all things geek. I'm your host, the Arbiter, and if you're into video games, movies, esports, and pop culture, you came to the right place. And whether you're a lifelong geek or if you're just becoming a new geeky geek, the Nerf Show is the best place to be. So let's take a seat and let's talk geek. Welcome back, everybody. We are in for some fun today. We got a lot of things that we're going to be able to talk about today in today's episode, and I'm very excited to share about what we're going to be uh, chatting with today. So, for today's episode, our main, I guess you could say, our main topic for today is I guess you could say that's pretty much of a common topic, but it's for us to be able to give our insight for it. But it's basically from our transitions of Marvel Comics to Marvel Cinema. That's what it is. Marvel Comics to Marvel Cinema. And I don't know. I feel like that it doesn't get, talked about as much, but we're going to chat about it today. So, but before we get into it, we're going to be able to give you some of the recent updates or give you some upcoming stuff, maybe, for some of the things between video games, movies, esports, or pop culture in general. For today's episode, we're gonna talk about both between in the video games segments and within movies and TV clips, as you per se. With the video games that we have been experiencing a lot lately, we've been seeing a lot of, excuse me, a lot of new releases and a lot of big updates that has been happening within the gaming world. We've seen a lot of big title games that have come out this year. We've seen a lot of big titles known as like Helldivers 2, Tekken 8, and then we've had a lot of new games that we've heard about for a while, but we weren't sure about how it was going to pan out. Like games like Suicide Squad. That was a game that it was like iffy, and we weren't sure about if it was going to be a liking game or if folks were going to like it, or in general if the public was going to like it at all. I personally have seen gameplay of it. I'm not huge surprised by it just yet. I'm kind of waiting to see of what brings more into it. I feel like it's just a pretty much like, I feel like it's just a standard open world game where you just party up with people and you just go around, just do missions and stuff like that. And I feel like that with Suicide Squad, they could be able to do something a little bit better for it. And I don't know. I think that's just more of something that we're going to end up seeing probably later on. Probably something that we might have seen more development being built into, but I'm not sure yet. We'll just have to wait and see about what develops on. We do know about of a couple other new titles that have come out. Like for example, we've had X Defiant. That is become a huge hit. I believe it's been out for at least a week now. But it has become a huge hit by many gamers, between of YouTubers, streamers, pro gamers, you name it. And a lot of people have been very excited about this game coming out. It has like that Call of Duty vibe into it, where the movement and the shooting mechanics and such like that is pretty much kind of a similar way to Call of Duty, but obviously with X Defiant, it has a little bit of different stuff to it. If you are not familiar with X Defiant, uh, the best way to give an explanation about it is that it takes of your other like villains, other NPCs from like other uh games from that were created from Ubisoft, and they just basically combined it into one game. This game is uh created and partnered with Ubisoft. So if you ever want to play it, that's where you can be able to see it under. And it's also on platforms between Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. And it is cross-platform, so you can be able to play against all players from all segments and be able to have one heck of a time with it. We have known that with the characters or NPCs in the game, can be able to have special abilities and tactics. There's some characters where you can end up playing as some of the villains from the Division, where they had like a flamethrower to use as like a weapon, or you can end up being as like kind of like some characters from Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. There's a few maps also within the game itself where it basically takes from games like Tom Clancy's The Division, and then also other things like as Splinter Cell. Uh, and it's become a very interesting game. If you have not seen or played it yet, it is huge. It is a huge recommendation to give it a try. I've played it several times, and honestly, I do like playing the game. I think the game is very fun. I think it is very entertaining to play, and I just have just a wow with it. I feel like there's a lot more coming into the game, and I feel like that we're going to see a lot more development to it, and I think it's going to become a big hit um, as it goes on. And then along with big releases like X Defiant, we've also had big update releases like Fortnite, for example. Fortnite has had its most recent update, where it ended up introducing uh, the next season for uh, for Chapter 5. And it has become a huge hit because it ends up introducing a whole Mad Max theme with a bunch of the cars, the upgrades, the cannons and such that you can be able to use with those cars and be able to go around blowing people up. And it's just become a huge hit, especially if you are partying up with other players. We've also seen within the update as well that there has been a little bit of a Fallout aspects into it as well. And if you're not familiar with what Fallout is or the Fallout TV show, recommend for you to be able to try out both the video games of Fallout and watch the TV show Fallout. They are great shows great show and games, and it is something that you definitely need to give it a try, so that you understand of what that character is. But you can end up getting certain things like new colas. You even get the battle armor night skin from Fallout as itself in general. So overall, the season has not disappointed with all of its new additions added to it. It has definitely become more of a squad game right now because with the new additions with vehicles and all this crazy stuff you could do within the game now, it is a very fun, entertaining game, especially if you got friends to play with along the way as well. And then also on top of that, we've also seen uh, updates in Call of Duty. If you have not been aware, it has been a little bit now, but we have understood that Rebirth Island has come back. They have placed it back into the game, so players and streamers are super excited about playing back on Rebirth Island once again, and you have a lot of big hits And I'm not gonna say the streamer names out loud because don't know if we could be able to go about saying those out loud. So, this is only the second episode here, so we're slowly moving on here. So, um, but yeah, and if you remember Rebirth Island, well, get yourself on over to Rebirth Island and be able to get a couple kills in there as well. So, um, the next thing we want to be able to mention about what the video game aspects is we've been seeing a lot of open world games being brought up, like not like like huge open world games, but we've seen a couple titles that have been brought in, like for example Skull and Bones, that has become the new uh addition to the open world game verse, used to say. Skull and Bones, you get to play as a pirate, and you can command and operate your own ship, and be able to act like a pirate, doing whatever it is you could be able to do in Skull and Bones. Personally, I have not given it a try yet, but I might actually be able to give it a go because it does seem fun, and I think it's just one of those games where you could have a good time with folks online. It is it it reminds you about playing the other pirate game that came out years ago, Sea of Thieves. And if you ever remember playing that, that was a very fun game about playing with a lot of folks. Yeah, you could be able to play by yourself and all, but it was one of those games where it's like you definitely want to have several people with you playing it to have a good old time on it. Now, along with open world stuff, we've also had a lot of remaster games that have been released, fairly, I wouldn't say recent, but like throughout the past couple years, we've had a bunch of games that have been remastered and have been released to other platforms for playable access. Like for example, we've had The Last of Us Part 1 being released to PC, and it has been accessible onto Steam and Epic Games. So if you have access to a PC and never played The Last of Us, you can be able to have access to be able to play that and be able to play it on your own computer or the console per se. Um, I've had the liberty to be able to play The Last of Us Part 1. I thought it was an awesome game. I'm tempted to play it again, but try to get put on the hardest difficulty to the game because I played it on the second most difficulty, and boy, was it fun, but at the same time, it was just terrible because every time you end up dying on like the hardest difficulties, you end up going back to a certain point in the game, whether if it was like to 30 minutes or to an hour or the beginning of the game in general, where it just became a huge mess from it. So overall, sorry, caught off for a second. So overall, I thought that was something that was pretty cool. And then also we've had other remasters where, especially recently, we've had the remaster of the new trilogy game set of Tomb Raider. If you guys have never played those are games that are very fun. I am personally replaying those games again on my own PC, and I'm having a blast with it. So if you ever have a chance, you want to be able to end up playing the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, you want to be able to play Rise of the Tomb Raider, and be able to play Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Those three games are just phenomenal. I recommend it to anybody who likes to be able to have a good role-playing game and has good adventure, and if you're into puzzles and stuff, it's got very interesting puzzles in the game as well, and I think it's a huge hit. I wish they could be able to make more of those games because I feel like that those games in general were just as good, along with the voice actors into the game, especially the voice actors that played both Lara and Jonah in all three games were, incredibly fantastic. So if they were able to bring back more, I'd be playing those uh, instantly. No contest of it, anything. I would be playing it nonstop. So, but that's going to be for the video game parts of it. So we're just going to end up popping up to our next category for movies and clips. So for the movies and clips segment here of our show, we're just going to cover a few of interesting topics that I have come across and thought they were really interesting to talk about. One that we're gonna end up having a lot of changes within you know movies in general. We've had a lot of changes within the video, I should say the visual display to it, where a lot of visual effects and special effects have literally basically become fully live action. I know that for myself, for example, I had just recently have seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And even though that the movie itself was basically effects and visual effects and a whole 9 yards for that, it literally physically seems to be all live action. To be honest, like I thought that those were physical people, or let me phrase it, physical apes that were moving around and everything. You know, we've had so much change ever since like the first TV show, the first movie that came out onto the big screen, and it has revolutionized the entire way that we see of everything, and it has just become increasingly uh um you know wonderful, because one, as for those who make the movies and all, it gives them a more way to be creative of how they can be able to show presentation of a movie and how they want to present it. And things like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that was a very very uh excellent way for them to show their creativity. And then we're gonna end up having a lot of other things like coming out, like the Mad Max movie that's coming out, Feroza. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We have that one that's coming out, and then we have like other movies that are going to be coming out, like If. If is also another movie with Ryan Reynolds. And speaking of Ryan Reynolds, whew, did if anyone has ever any counted or anything like that, but we I have just learned, and I don't know if this is like a record or something like that, but Ryan Reynolds made like 8 movies within the past 3 to 4 years. I think that's pretty impressive, due to the fact that it's within a 3 to 4 year time frame between of movies that have been both on the big screen and that have been on on streaming platforms like Apple TV and Netflix. We've had movies that Ryan Reynolds that played in, like If, for example. He's also been in other things, like Six Underground, and then Spirited. Those were both Netflix and Apple TV. And then we have new movies that he's coming out with, like If is one of them. And then also another movie that he's, that has been a huge talk. And if you don't know which one I'm talking about now, and you've seen it on commercials and everything, you should know about what it is. You should see on TikTok and everything. But Deadpool and Wolverine, that has become the huge talk of the upcoming movie that is going to be coming out in July. And with him partnering with Hugh Jackman, which I think, between like myself as a fan and a fan of Hugh Jackman and Wolverine, I think we've been waiting for that collab for a very very long time, and we are finally getting that satisfaction of them actually doing it. And within the years of discussions and stuff, where it's like, oh, we're gonna end up doing Wolverine and Deadpool. Wolverine and Deadpool. We should end up doing the collab where we have Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds, and Hugh Jackman playing in a movie together. And you know what? After what? Since the first Deadpool movie, which came out in 2018, we finally got it. You know, Hugh Jackman is repraising his role as Wolverine, and you know, he's giving us the satisfaction to star back into it. And you know what's even funny is that if you guys have not noticed, that if you ever see the clips, it's the Wolverine outfit that he wears is practically visually similar to the same Wolverine outfit that you would see in the original 97 X-Men. It's roughly similar. It's fairly similar with the yellow, the blue, and then the X at his the belt waist. And I feel like that we're going to end up getting a branch of into it where we have the new introduce of a new X-Men segment, which would probably possibly where we see Hugh Jackman continue his character as Wolverine. And if you don't remember, if you've ever seen the movie The Marvels, we did end up seeing the X-Men being showed in the after credits, where it was the same X-Men of Hank McCoy in the 97 X-Men. So we might end up seeing something where we end up getting a new segment of X-Men, but it's the X-Men that we've all grow up with back in the 90s. So I'm hoping we see something of that nature. Maybe we might end up seeing Patrick Stewart maybe play more of his role as as Professor X. Who knows? You know, we might end up seeing more of that. Maybe they might end up recasting everybody in the X-Men franchise for that whole world to see. Who knows? But I am glad that did not make sense. I am glad that they are actually trying to take a chance about branching into X-Men again, because if you guys remember watching the X-Men movies that came out back in the late 2010s, where we had X-Men's First Class, we had X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse, and X-Men Dark Phoenix, where that showed a completely earlier side of the X-Men, between of the First Class all the way up to Dark Phoenix, where Jean Grey ends up experiencing her powers as the Phoenix. So I feel like that they're going to end up branching into that part again, just as a different explanation about how it leads up to everything between of how the Phoenix comes about, how they bring to resolution of that, or how the characters between Wolverine, Cyclops, Gambit, any one of those ends up developing throughout time. The death of Professor X, officially death of Professor X. We've seen Professor X come back so many times. If you don't want me to say Professor X, let's say Charles Xavier, where we've seen him come back so many times in the movie. So I mean, personally, I would like to see something new with the X-Men, but bringing something back that's a little familiar per se. So and I also think that I think we're gonna end up experiencing a lot more branches. Branches, is that the word for it? Either way, I feel like that we're going to end up experiencing a lot more of those moving forward into the stream platforms like Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV, Peacock, and such, etc., etc. So that's going to be our movie segments and clips. Alrighty then. Now we are here to the big talk. Marvel Comics to Marvel Cinema. Now, you might be asking about, why such a topic? Why mention that? Because everyone knows about Marvel Comics, everyone knows about Marvel cinema, but it's not just mainly just about that. It's more about how we go a perspective about how we learned and seen it throughout the years. Now, if you guys aren't familiar, I'll give you a little history lesson here. So, back in the 30s, Marvel Comics was originally founded by Martin Goodman, and he founded the company as Timely Comics. So it wasn't officially called Marvel Comics until the 60s. Reason why for that is because comics was not even huge yet. It was just an idea that just came about that people had been trying. And DC Comics came out first, and then Marvel Comics came out a few years later. And a lot of people did not know about how it was going to end up portraying. And then later within the years, it was becoming a big hit because comics was just a way for people to be able to show a story of creativity, but through things like superheroes and villains, which is what basically skyrocketed that franchise overall. And when we hit the 1950s, name of Timely Comics got changed to Atlas Comics, and then by that time, comics were basically skyrocketing because it was just becoming a huge hit by so many people of ages, kids, adults, teenagers, you name it. But then until we hit 1961, that was when we finally hit that point of bringing Marvel into the name, and that's when we had Stan Lee, Excelsior, one and only, may he rest in peace, and Jack Kirby, to bring that whole segment alive and to basically bring it into the next age, and bringing it out as more it was when it first started in the 30s. And their first comic that they ended up introducing with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby was Fantastic Four #1. And when they introduced that, it became a hit. Fantastic Four basically became a huge hit between of the four characters, between of Reed Richards, couldn't say that, aka Mr. Fantastic, Susan Storm, aka the Invisible Woman, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and Ben Grimm, known as the Thing. So once that ended up becoming a hit, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee end up understanding that, these comics, these heroes have become a huge hit. Let's see what we can think about next. So that's when Stan Lee ended up coming up with characters within the years, like Spider-Man, X-Men, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, the Avengers, Captain America. Any type of superhero character that you have learned about have become huge hits after another. When it came to Stan Lee, his big hits of comics was Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and I believe Captain America and the Avengers. Those were basically his huge comics because one, Fantastic Four was just something that they played with and it became a huge hit. And Stanley thought, with Spider-Man, he thought, we've seen spiders. Spiders are so unique on so many things. What if we made that as a superhero? And so we made that into Spider-Man, and that became the second hugest hit that Marvel Comics released within within those years when Stanley and Jack Kirby basically became ownership of Marvel Comics. Now, with comics being on the rise, you know, they had to, they didn't want to stop there, so they had to be able to come up with things to keep on portraying these characters, and the best way for them to bring them alive was shows and movies. Now they didn't really branch into show or movies just yet. Movies didn't really become part of a thing until the 90s, when they started introducing it as movies. But they did end up doing TV shows and all back in the 70s, where they did Captain America, Thor, Spider Man. There's a huge list of characters that they brought into as TV shows in the 70s. And it wasn't just us that came up with some of these ideas. We've actually had a lot of other people within the years, like folks from Japan, also had similar ideas. And then we've also had other countries that have had similarities of how to share it, and and that's where we end up introducing the characters as live action characters. And DC has had their fair share with that too. um and so with Marvel continuing on with it, they end up introducing movies in the 90s, and their first movie that they end up introducing with Marvel name status was Blade. Blade start was the start of it, where they introduced a character who was half human, half vampire. And they were like, boy, we had this in the comics. Let's give it a go on the big screen and see how it goes. So in 1998 was when they first introduced Blade, as probably one of the first live action superhero movies. Now, fairly granted, Blade wasn't really a superhero per se, but he was more of the play by his own rules type of superhero. But it was also another branch that Jack Kirby and Stanley played with, where you had like the anti-heroes, where they played by their own rules. They didn't really have like a structure code or morals, but they end up playing the good guy in the end of it. And if you guys are not familiar about what Blade is, he's half vampire, half human, and he was what they called in Blade called Daywalker, where basically he was able to move in sunlight where vampires couldn't. And so that became a huge hit within comics. And then when they introduced more movies with it, they brought in 2002, where they introduced Blade 2, because the first one became such a huge hit, so they developed the second one. And then the second one was even a bigger of a hit, so they came up with a third one with Blade Trinity in 2004, and it had Ryan Reynolds in it. Another movie that Ryan Reynolds played in. Anywho, I'm sorry. I had to do that. But that ended up introducing a lot of ways about how they could end up bringing it to the big screen. Now, throughout the years, we've had several more big hits coming into the big screen. We've had Spider-Man that came out in early 2000s. I believe the first one came out in 2003 with Tobey Maguire. And then they also did Fantastic Four with I believe in 2004 2005. And what two good groups of superheroes to start with for movies. So both of those character franchises became big hits. The Spider-Man movie basically generated to 3 movies with Tobey Maguire, and then the Fantastic Four movie was able to make two movies, one with the cast and against Doctor Doom, and then the other one with the Silver Surfer. Excuse me, I cannot be able to talk to you guys today. Um, but yeah, so that ended up introducing those characters into it, and we end up having big hits for it. Now, throughout the years after that, there wasn't really big developments of into a lot of Marvel movies for it. But when 2008 came around, that's when we had the introduction of the MCU. If you're not familiar about what MCU is and you live under a rock, that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man and the one and only himself, Robert Downey Jr., playing as Tony Stark. And once that came about, it basically got to the stratosphere after that, because when we end up having with Iron Man starting in 2008, that became the introduction with introducing Thor, Captain America, the Hulk, and then end up introducing other characters like Black Widow, Hawkeye, and we've had huge uprising with those characters from 2008 all the way up to today, with the release of Deadpool and Wolverine coming out in July. And we've seen a lot of characters, we've seen a lot of stories written, we've seen a lot of adventures and a lot of experiences within the Marvel Cinematic Universe that has left a huge digital footprint to the world and to the movie industry overall. And you've had huge big movies where they've had Chris Hemsworth as a big hit for Thor, Chris Evans big hit for Captain America, and then you've had Mark Ruffalo, who became a huge hit with the Hulk. Now, granted, there has been a couple other Hulks before him, but overall, when it came to actors and for those who have played the character well, Mark Ruffalo probably did a better job than other actors who played as the Hulk in previous movies. Not to say that they were bad, but I think that when it came to display of how they were, I think Mark Ruffalo did a better job for it. I'm just saying, if you disagree with me, well, you can put that in the comments for it. So, and then when it came to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we thought it was becoming to an end when Endgame came out in 2019. We thought that whole segment was coming to a close, but then when we ended up hearing about the new sets of movies of Phase 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't even know what phase we're currently in right now. But, when the new hits that they came out with, movies like Captain Marvel, Shang-Chi, and then other movies that they have brought out throughout the years, they just kept on going. Black Panther is also another one. And after that, it's like, what can we do next, Marvel? What can we do next? Oh, we have a new streaming platform called Disney Plus. Hey, guess what, guys? Let's start putting Marvel in there. So that's what they did. They started putting the Marvel movies up on Disney Plus, but not just Marvel movies. They've also been able to create TV shows and be able to stream it on Disney Plus. We've had a lot of characters from the MCU that we weren't sure if we were going to end up getting shows from them, and we've had it. We've had the Winter Soldier and Falcon having their own TV show, the Scarlet Witch with her own show. We've had Loki with his own show. We've also had Ms. Marvel. We've had a lot of other titles that have come out. And if I haven't been able to say all of them, I do apologize. That was just the ones that came to my head at the moment. So don't hate me for that. But overall, along with just the movies by themselves, those have become huge hits. With the TV shows, they've become huge hits. Along with it, and also including like other characters like Hawkeye. Yeah, you didn't think he was going to have his own show either. Well, he did. Yeah, he did. And then we end up having other characters that we didn't really think of, like Echo, for example. That was a show that came out where we did not think that was gonna be a hit. And same thing as for She-Hulk. She-Hulk came up with their own show, and we had no idea if that was gonna be a big hit either. But both shows became a huge hit, even though that they were not characters that were physically recognized a lot, but they became very popular once the shows came out. And once they got more recognition from that, they were being, cosplayed, at conventions, you name it. And uh, and I think it's just beginning from there. And one thing that I did forget to mention was, if was the original Marvel shows that came out uh, along when the MCU. Because if you aren't familiar, we did have Marvel shows that were on Netflix. If you aren't familiar those, they're on Disney Plus. You gotta watch it. And if you don't know what those are, it's Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, The Iron Fist, Punisher. Um, oh shoot, I think those were the only ones. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the mini series, The Defenders, where they had all four of them together. And if you haven't watched any of those, you gotta see those, because if you've seen Spider-Man, the I can't even think of the full name right now, but Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland. If you did not remember the person who played as the lawyer, or per se blind lawyer, uh, into that movie, we did see Matt Murdock. And if you weren't familiar who Matt Murdock was, Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, was also in it. So we might end up seeing a future where Matt Murdock comes back into the Marvel universe. And granted, he has his own show. So if you haven't seen it, go take a look. But getting back to the whole shows and stuff, we're seeing a lot of those characters that you just don't hear about, and we're seeing them of how they end up sharing their stories and how they uh, partake within the Marvel universe as well. Now, we are going to end up having more titles coming down the road. We have other things like Ironheart, for example. We've also had rumors where, like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans might come back to reprise their roles in certain movies and shows. It's all that is up in the air, but we might end up seeing something like that maybe in the future. But we have shows like Ironheart. Then we have other things like Shang-Chi 2, where that will be coming up within the few years. And so we're just going to end up seeing about how everything plays out. But I think it's going to be very interesting for it. Now, the question that you could probably think to yourselves is that what is the future for the MCU? What's the future for Marvel Comics? Are they going to be able to come up with more characters? Are they going to be able to bring out more movies? Or are they going to end up revamping movies from shows? Or are they going to revamp shows from movies? We don't know. But as far as what we have seen if you made sure to pay attention to after credits from seeing Marvel movies, we've been basically get a glimpse of certain things that might happen within the next ones. Like for example, with the Marvels, having the little after credits with the X-Men, and then we end up having little after credits like from Shang-Chi, where they end up trying to explain about the Ten Rings. Um, so we're just gonna end up seeing about how everything plays out within the MCU overall and Marvel Comics by itself as well. Whether if Jack Kirby is going to be introducing new characters, or whether if there's going to be new developments with those characters, whether if they're going to be male or female. The sky's the limit about what Marvel Comics can be able to do at this point. And how they decide to do it is going to be very, very interesting. And how the MCU reflects onto that is going to be even better. So hopefully that, along with that down the road, we might end up seeing a lot more things come along within the years. Now, other things that I did not mention, you have superhero groups like the Eternals, which we had their own movie as well, and there might be a second movie to it, or we might end up getting um, other titles that might end up having sequels or trilogies. We just don't know yet, but the vast opportunities for it is going to become bigger, bigger, and bigger. So, um, but I'm just waiting to see about what happens. But for now, to start with, I'm just more excited to see about how Deadpool and Wolverine pays out when it comes out in July. So, um, yeah, I think that's just how it is for Marvel Comics and the MCU. But other than that, guys, thanks for listening to the Nerf Herder Show. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media for all latest news and updates. But until next time, stay geeky.